knowledge to save the hopeless in a crumbling America. Too real. Hey kings and queens and royal beings, my name is Jessica. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. I know it's now 2021. I'm still going to film the books I got within the last half of 2020. It's not as much as I thought it would be, but I feel like I am forgetting some books. So I normally go by like where I got them from, but I truly can't remember. Like, I know some of them I got from like Barnes & Noble, some I got from Half Price Books, some I got from Second and Charles, but I don't remember exactly where. I feel like actually a majority of these came from Barnes & Noble, so whatever. So how I'm gonna do the haul today is kind of like based off of the category they're in. So like some of them are fantasy-esque, literary fiction, thrillers, and horror. So I'm just gonna tell you the genres as I go about with the haul. So first we're going to start with books that I personally didn't buy. They're gifts. First up, I have Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty, which is the sequel to City of Brass. I actually got this from Dee because she was getting the hardbacks and I have the paperback of City of Brass, so she sent me this and not pictured because it's like I put it away already. She also sent me the hardcover for Stalking Jack the Ripper because I have all the other series in hardcover. Just Stalking Jack the Ripper was in paperback, and she had a copy in hardcover. So yes, she sent that to me. So thank you again, Dee. Next up, I got The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang, and this was actually gifted to me by Jocelyn for my birthday. This is the sequel to the Poppy War. I can't really tell you guys what it's about. It's just following Rin after what happened in the Poppy War. Thank you again, Jocelyn. Really appreciate it. I still haven't read it. I was trying to read it in like the end of 2020, but it just didn't happen. Next up, I actually got this from my aunt for my birthday, and this is Shine by Jessica Jung, which she is actually from Girls' Generation. So this is about a 17-year-old Korean American named Rachel Kim. She wants to be a K-pop star, so she's been training with DB Entertainment, which is like one of the largest K-pop labels. As she's training to be a K-pop idol, she has to follow certain rules from the label, and one of the main things is like don't date, which would be fine, but eventually she starts to develop feelings for Jason Lee, I think that was his name. Yeah, Jason Lee, which he is the top male K-pop idol in their label. Jessica Jung is a member of Girls' Generation, so it'll be interesting to read a book about becoming a K-pop star by a K-pop idol. Next up, I got Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This is a gift from this Facebook group that I'm in, where you can give somebody on the month of their birthday something from their Amazon wish list, which this is what I was gifted. Next up, I have two books from Jules. It was like a gift from the holidays. So first is The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinska. This is a YA novel. I added this to my Amazon wish list like a while ago, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of forgot what it's about. Every year on St. Walpurga's Eve, Caldella's witch queen lures a boy back to her palace. An innocent life must be sacrificed on the full moon to keep the island city from sinking. Lena Kirk is convinced her brother is going to be taken this year. To save him, she enlists the help of the mysterious Thomas Lynn, the boy she secretly loves and the only person ever to escape from the palace. But they draw the queen's attention, and Thomas is chosen as the sacrifice. Queen Ava casts away her heart when her sister died for the boy she loved. Now, as queen, she won't make the same mistake. With the tide rising and the islanders whispering that Ava's magic is failing, she's willing to sacrifice anyone if it means saving the city. When Lena offers herself in exchange for Thomas's freedom, the two girls await the full moon together. But Lena is not at all what Ava expected, and the queen is nothing like Lena envisioned. Against their wills, they find themselves falling for each other. As water floods Caldella's street and the dark tide demands its sacrifice, they must choose who to save, themselves, each other, or the island city relying on them both. Thank you, Jules. Next up from Jules, I got Fungi, which is like a collection of short stories about like fungi. and I believe it's like kind of horror-esque, and this is edited by Silvia Moreno Garcia and Oren Gray. I actually thought that it was just by Silvia Moreno Garcia, but it's just edited by her. But either way, I'm excited. Like I said, it's a bunch of short stories, and it says the stories range from noir to dark fantasy, from steampunk to body horror. So sounds like a bunch of like more darker themed books, especially because noir, dark fantasy, body horror with fun guy. I don't know what to expect because I don't think I've heard of any of these other authors, but I'm still really excited. So yes, those are all the books that I've been gifted. We're on the darker path of books anyway, so we're just going to continue on with like my thriller / horror books. First up, this is like a romantic thriller, suspenseful kind of book, and it's When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. Alyssa Cole is, to be honest, she's like an auto-buy author for me at this point. Like, I freaking love Princess in Theory series. I'm excited for her other ones that are coming. I think this was the October choice for Black Hottie's book club, but I didn't get to read it because I suck. I know this is set in Brooklyn and it deals with a lot with gentrification. I also have the audiobook for this, so probably will be listening to the audiobook sometime soon. Next up, and this is just like straight up horror, is The Troop by Nick Cutter. Once a year, Scoutmaster Tim Riggs leads a troop of boys into the Canadian wilderness for a weekend camping trip, a tradition as comforting and reliable as a good ghost story around a roaring bonfire. When an unexpected intruder stumbles upon their campsite, shockingly thin, disturbingly pale, and voraciously hungry, Tim and the boys are exposed to something far more frightening than any tale of terror: the human carrier of a bioengineered nightmare, a horror that spreads faster than fear, a harrowing struggle for survival with no escape from the elements, the infected, or one another. I heard that this book was fucked up. I'm excited. I wanted to read this on Halloween, but once again, I suck. What the hell did I even read in October? Like, all my scary books or thriller-esque books that I own, and I didn't fucking read a single one. Well, that's kind of a lie, but like, what was I doing? What was I reading? Clearly not this. Clearly not When No One Was Watching. I don't know. Next up is a book that I got specifically for Latinx Heritage Month. This is My Mother's House by Francesca Montplaisir, and this is a book about, how do I even describe this book? Because this book was really, I did actually read this book, and this book was it was a lot. It was a ride. It was about Lucien, who is a Haitian immigrant. Him and his family like go to New York, and he buys this house that is like super run down, and it was previously owned by like Italian mobsters. It became like a refuge house for other Haitian immigrants. And this book is in the point of view of Lucien and the house, because the house saw many horrors, because first of all, it was owned by Italian mobsters, and then Lucien is just oof. There was just like a lot of stuff that happened in this house that the house is just like disgusting. There was a lot of trigger warnings from what I remember. There was death, kidnapping, there was rape, there was animal cruelty. I have the list of the trigger warnings in my description for Latinx TBR, so I'm gonna just put them in the description as well, because I can't remember all of them, but it was a lot. So if you want to read this book, check out the trigger warnings. And I actually really like the audiobook because I listened to this from Libby and I loved the audiobook. It was good. Next up, a book that was like caught my attention because of the sprayed edges. 1, 2, the cover. And then I looked it up on Goodreads and it's had like a 4.5. It had a pretty high rating. But the book is The Reverie by Peter Fehervari. This book, I'm not gonna lie, I read it and I was like intrigued, but I was also kind of confused. So, and it's like a mixture of like sci-fi and horror. I really can't put it in my own words how to describe this book. Exalting war and art in harmony, the warrior artisans of the Angels Resplendent have forced a radiant haven amidst a blighted galaxy. But an ancient sin stains their honor, a wound in their world that will never heal. Ignorant souls would call it a forest, but those who watch over it know better. Nothing natural grows in the reverie's snow-swept glades or wanders amongst the unnatural things that do, save for the intruders who trespass on its pain. Some seek revelation or redemption, others dream of winning a place amongst the resplendent, but all come because they must. 3 travelers are drawn into the conspiracy that wards the wound. A knight haunted by his lost humanity, an aging poet who refuses to go gently into the night, and a scholar who yearns to redeem mankind. All must face their shadows in the reverie, but only one shall gaze upon its heart, where a deeper darkness beats. I'm sure once I start reading it, it won't be so, like, confusing, but at the moment, it just, like, intrigues me because the cover, again, but also just, like, how it's written. It's just, I don't know, it just drew my attention. So, and it's pretty short. It's only 349 pages. Trying not to spoil myself. Hoping to read this soon, like all my other books, but we shall see. So next up we have Cursed, which is an anthology full of more horror-esque retellings of folktale and fairy tales, which if you ever paid attention to some of these fairy tales, they're actually pretty dark anyway. I'm just super excited because it has, like, let me see. It seems like it's got probably Snow White, Peter Pan, Red Riding Hood, Hansel and Gretel probably. I wanted to read this again during Halloween. Didn't happen. As you can tell, I've been like kind of on a horror kick. So one of the ways that I've been prepping myself for the horror genre is by reading horror mangas. I got Uzumake by Junji Ito. This is following Hirigoshima as her and her boyfriend live in this town called Kurosawa-cho. Probably butchered that, I'm so sorry. Their town is being haunted not by a person or by like a thing, but a pattern. Uzumake, aka spirals. This is just following all of the strange events that happen in their town. If you don't like spirals, obviously you're not gonna like this. It's also got some body horror in here. I loved it, but I was kind of disgusted by it. Next up we have Shiver, which is another book by Junji Ito, but this is short stories all in one bind up. Read this one also. Grossed out, but it was so good. Next we have one that I'm currently reading, and that is Smashed, also by Junji Ito. This is another bind up of 13 Chilling Nightmares. Currently reading this one. I think I've only read like 2 stories and I'm enjoying it so far. Next up we're going to be on our more fantasy-esque books. First we have The Archive of the Forgotten by A.J. Hackwith, which this is the sequel to The Library of the Unwritten, so can't really tell what happens. It just follows Claire in the aftermath of what happened in The Library of the Unwritten. I haven't heard anybody really talk about this book. I think it's like been kind of 3-star from what I remember, from what I've seen some of the reviews. Next up I have The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. I feel like as a reader, any books that have to do with books, bookshops, libraries, you just kind of are drawn to it. This follows Irene, and she is a professional spy for the Mysterious Library, which is an organization that collects important works of fiction from different realities. She and her assistant have been sent to an alternative London where their mission is to retrieve a dangerous book. But the problem is, by the time they arrive, it's already been stolen. The alternative London's underground factions are like willing to fight for the death to find the tomb before Irene and Kai do. This alternative world that they're in is just infused with chaos. The laws of nature are bent to allow supernatural creatures and unpredictable magic to just run rampant all over the place. So Irene is just caught up in all of this chaotic madness, and it's just imperative for her to not fail, not only because her reputation is at stake, but also the nature of reality is at stake as well. This cover is not my favorite. It's kind of like plain to me personally, because I like a lot of I like this, so this is kind of plain to me. So next up we have A Sky Beyond the Storm, which is the 4th and the final book, the Ember of the Ashes series. The year book tag, I kept on calling it the Torch Against the Night series. It's actually an Ember in the Ashes series. I don't know. Again, this is the 4th and the last book, so I really can't tell you guys what's up. I already read it, loved it. I'm excited for Saba's next books. Next up is a book that I saw mostly on Twitter, and actually the story is funny how I got it. So I was at Barnes & Noble. This book where I was at was like at the top of a bookshelf, and those Those bookshelves are taller than my bookshelves, and I already have a hard time reaching the top shelf. I literally had to ask somebody, like, hey, as you can see, I'm short. Can you get this book for me? Which I was kind of embarrassed to do, but I was like, you know what? I can't. My parents' jeans just kind of fucked me over in the height department. I got Deal with the Devil by Kit Rocha. This is the first book in the Meet the Mercenary librarian series. Again, another book with libraries. So this book is described as Orphan Black meets the post-apocalyptic Avengers. And I don't watch Orphan Black, but I'm a sucker for Marvel. Nina is an information broker with a mission. She and her team of mercenary librarians use their knowledge to save the hopeless in a crumbling America. Too real. Knox is the bitter, battle-weary captain of the Silver Devils. His squad of super soldiers went AWOL to avoid slaughtering innocents, and now he's fighting to survive. They're on a deadly collision course, and the passion that flares between them only makes it more dangerous. They could burn down the world, destroying each other in the process, or they could do the impossible, team up. I actually thought this was like an indie book, but like sometimes you see indie authors in Barnes and Noble, but like the publishing company, Tor. Oh, not indie then. Anyway, I haven't heard anybody talk about this book, but Mercenary Librarians. I'm really excited for this. And it's only 324 pages. Very short. Love the floppiness. Adult fantasy floppy books are they're superior. I actually kind of prefer them to the hardcovers, which is, I know, controversial. But adult fantasy paperbacks, their floppiness, just something different. Speaking of adult fantasy, we have Jade City by Fonda Lee, which this book has been highly raved by people that I trust, like Mina. Jocelyn loves this. Can't remember who else loved it. Well, I know Jocelyn said she didn't love it as much as other people, but she says that I would love Hilo. Kind of just bought that because of this. For centuries, honorable Greenbone warriors have used magical jade to enhance their abilities and defend the island of Kikon from foreign invasion. Now the war is over, and a new generation vies for control of Kikon's bustling capital city. 4 siblings of the powerful Kaul family must prepare for battle, and the fragile peace between the clans is about to break. To be honest, even before people on Book Twitter were talking about this, like, Jade War was available, which is the sequel to Jade City. I was only seeing Jade War every time I just added it to my cart, and I just never pressed enter. But then as it grew more and more popular, I just said, fuck it, and let's just buy it. So, don't know when I'm gonna read it, but hopefully soon, and I'm hoping I love it, because once adult fantasy is just so expensive. Can it not, please? So next up we have The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, and this is a translated book, and this is translated by a Lucia Graves. This is a historical fiction novel that I believe some magical realism elements to it. One of my goals for 2021 is to read some translated books. It is set in 1945 Barcelona after World War II. This follows Daniel. His father is an antiquarian book dealer and mourning the loss of his mother. So he finds solace in this book called Shadow of the Wind by Julian Carac, and so he ends up like setting out to look for more of the books written by Julian. But he discovers that someone has been systematically destroying every copy of every book that Julian Carac has ever written. And actually, he believes that his copy of The Shadow of the Wind is the only copy left. This opens up a door into one of Barcelona's darkest secrets, which is full of murder, madness, and doomed love. Once again, a book that has something to do with books. Maybe I should do a video about that. Maybe. We'll see. Next up, this I actually bought because I was looking for this book, and I was on Goodreads, and then you know how like they have the list. So this list was like books about books or something to do with books. So this is another historical fiction book. So this book that I'm talking about is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, and I believe this also has to do with vampires, if I'm not mistaken. Breathtakingly suspenseful and beautifully written, The Historian is the story of a young woman's plunged into a labyrinth where the secrets of her family's past connect to an inconceivable evil, the dark 15th century reign of Vlad the Impaler, and a time-defying pact that may have kept his awful work alive through the ages. The search for the truth becomes an adventure of monumental proportions, taking us from monasteries and dusty libraries to the capitals of Eastern Europe, in a feat of storytelling so rich, so hypnotic, so exciting that it has enthralled readers around the world. It's kind of intimidating because the print is a little small, but once again, great floppiness. So I'm a little intimidated, but I'm excited. Next up, we have a memoir, which is kind of books that I don't really read that often either, but it is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Next up is books that I don't really read like a lot, but trying to expand my reading. First up, we have 6 Gothic Stories, which is just a bind-up of 6 Gothic stories because I read Mexican Gothic towards the middle of 2020, and because I don't really read Gothic books, like I still really loved Mexican Gothic, but I wasn't what I was expecting, and I think it's because I've never really read in the Gothic genre. So I have been keeping an eye out for Gothic books, and when I was at Second and Charles, I literally saw this book called 6 Gothic Stories, and I was like, okay, here we go. 6 Gothic Tales it's called. Don't know what to expect because I have never heard of any of these authors because, once again, I don't read this genre. I want to expand my reading, and I really do want to get into the Gothic genre so I can get into the Gothic horror genre or like Gothic romance, you know. I think there's just something. Gives you dark academia vibes. We all know that's very popular, the whole aesthetic as well. Next up, we have Beowulf. And this one is actually like the translated. It has like obviously it's translated, but it's like has both the original as well as the English translation. This is following Beowulf, who is a Scandinavian hero. That's all I kind of really know about it, other than like when I watched the movie Beowulf. That was a long time ago, so I don't really remember. I just know it's about a hero. Like, I didn't know it was Scandinavian either. I just knew it was somewhere in that European area. I've kind of had my eye on this, like, because I knew it was like poetry. So don't know when I'm gonna read that, but I think this one will be one of my more easier like classics to read. Next up is one that I just fucking love how this book looks. It's just kind of like how I always kind of wanted my library to look, like my future one, which I know is impossible because like I have all these colorful covers and like spines and stuff like that, but this just gives me like classic study librarian, you know, the books you would find in a study. I saw this at Second and Charles around the rare books section, and I knew I had to take it home. But that book is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It does it not look like the kind of book you would see at like study? Really eloquent. Yeah, very eloquent. Speaking of classic book that looks like it belongs in a study, I also got Pride and Prejudice. You can't even tell. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. That was upside down. This is the International Collectors Library Edition. It's got like illustrations, and it's like, here we go, some illustrations. The deckled edges. So yeah, this is the cover, not this. This is the cover. Next up, I have 3 YA books, and one is like a contemporary, one is like suspense, I think. I don't really know the exact genre, and one is fantasy. First book is A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow by Laura Taylor Namey, and this I talked about in my most anticipated Latinx books of 2020 video. Next up is one that again caught my attention on Twitter because of the cover. Once again, I am a cover buyer, as we all know. I'm sure we can all repeat it at this point. That is Horrid by Katrina Leno. Following her father's death, Jane North Robinson and her mom, Ruth Ellen, moved from sunny California to the dreary, dilapidated old house in Maine where Ruth grew up. All they want is a fresh start, but behind North Manor's doors lurks a history that leaves them feeling more alone and more tortured. As the cold New England autumn arrives and Jane settles into her new home, she finds solace in old books and memories of her dad. She steadily begins making friends, but Jane also faces bullying from the resident bad seed and struggles to tamp down her own worst nature in response. Ruth seems to be spiraling with the return to her childhood home, but she won't reveal why. Then Jane discovers that the storage room Ruth has kept locked isn't for storage at all. It's a little girl's bedroom, left untouched for years and not quite as empty of inhabitants as it appears. Next up, we have How the King of Elfame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black, which this is a novella in Carden's point of view. This is the Barnes & Noble edition, by the way, because I have the Barnes & Noble edition of the Folk of the Air series. But if you've seen it, like the pages are thick, kind of like a storybook, like a picture book. That's the one I'm talking about, like a picture book. So it just kind of really makes sense that it's got like pictures. You can see it's like illustrated. Was it necessary? No. Did I love this? Yes, because you know what? I miss Jude and Carden. No shame. So we're on the last little pile, and these are my romance books because I am a romance lover, and it wouldn't make sense for me not to have bought romance books within the last 6 months. So first up are two historical romances, and I don't think they're actually the first in their series. But first we have The Secret Life of Miss Anna Marsh by Ella Quinn. It's following a girl named Anna Marsh, and she's always dreamed of this baron named Sebastian to ask for her hand in marriage. Of course, this all was before, when her brother was alive, before she vowed to secretly continue the work he valiantly died for. So like espionage, I guess a few years afterwards, Sebastian is finally courting her, but she is like, no, I have to like, she's trying to back him off basically, because if he were to discover her secret, he would never find her suitable for him. Now, Sebastian has like always known that Anna was gonna be his wife, and he like expected her to like kind of, you know, play hard to get, I guess. But as she's like continuously denying him, so he's like, there's more to this girl. She's not like other girls, you know? So he is trying to prove that they are meant to be, but he has to like unravel her secret. Don't know if this is the first in the series. And she's thick. Once again, I like the floppiness of this one, because sometimes historical romance floppiness books, they're not, the floppiness of the historical romance books just don't, they're not, it's not it. So next up we have a book that is definitely not the first in the series, but I own the first two in my Kindle. And for the most part, like, let's be honest, when you read historical romance books that are in series, it's not always necessary for you to read the books in order. Like, they're kind of, you can always kind of do standalones. I prefer reading them in order just because I like being introduced to the character. This book I got because of Lacey. I can't remember her YouTube channel, but she's like big romance YouTuber. I love her videos. She recommended this, and this is The Devil of Downtown by Joanna Shoup, and this is the third book in the Uptown Girls series. This is following Jack Mulligan. He was orphaned and abandoned on Bowery's main streets, and so he has had to like rely on himself ever since he was little because he was abandoned. Now he runs his territory with like an iron fist. And then he meets uptown do-gooder Justine Green, and she's like the very definition of an iron fist in a velvet glove, and he realizes that he may have met his match. Justine is devoted to tracking down deadbeat husbands, and she is also devoted to fight for their working conditions. When one of her little jobs brings her face to face with Jack, she's like kind of shocked because he runs a criminal empire, but he is also charming and much more gentlemanly than she could have ever imagined. They form this alliance, romance ensues, and then of course nothing really goes it's never always picture perfect. So something in Justine's past comes back to like bite her in the ass. So now it's up to them to try to possibly save her life, question mark. I don't really know if it's just up to them to try to figure out what's up. We have Crazy Stupid Romance by Alyssa K. Adams. This is the third book in the Undercover Bromance series following Alexis. And Alexis, we met her in Undercover Bromance, so I can't really tell how we met her because, spoiler, but this is just her romance with her best friend Noah. So friends to lovers. There you go. Next up, we have How to Fail at Flirting by Denise Williams. When her flailing department lands on the university's chopping block, Professor Nia Turner's friends convince her to shed her frumpy cardigan for an evening on the town. For one night, her focus will stray from her demanding job and she'll tackle a new kind of to-do list. When she meets a charming stranger in town on business, he presents the perfect opportunity to check off the items on her list. Let the guy buy her a drink? Check. Try something new? Check. A no strings attached hookup? Check. Almost. Jake makes her laugh and challenge Nia to rebuild her confidence, which was left toppled by her abusive ex-boyfriend. Soon, she's flirting with a chance at a more serious romantic relationship. Except nothing can be that easy. The complicated strings attached to her dating Jake might destroy her career. Nia has two options. She can protect her professional reputation and return to her old life, or she can flirt with the unknown and stay with the person who makes her feel like she's finally living again. Next up, we have Well Played by Jen DeLuca, and this is the second book in, I can't remember what the series is called. Read Well Met in 2019, I think I read Well Met in 2019, and this is just set in like a Renaissance fair like troupe that happens in like this town. Not really a troupe, it's like a town thing. This is the second book. Haven't gotten to it, but I've also kind of heard not very good things about it. Well, I don't know about not very good things about it, but definitely not as good as Well Met was. I already bought it, so I'm gonna read it soon. Last book in this haul, we have Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade, and this is obviously a romance. First, we're following Marcus, and Marcus is actually the lead actor in this series called Out to the Gates, which is very similar to Game of Thrones. Just think, when you think of this, think of Game of Thrones. He actually has a secret where he writes fan fiction for the show he's in. It's a secret because if anyone were to find out that he was writing fan fiction for this, he could end up getting into a lot of trouble because some of the comments he's made as his, like on his profile, is kind of like talking shit about the writers and what they've done. We can then meet a woman named April, and April is like a hardcore stan of this show / of the book series, especially this character named Lavinia. She writes fan fiction, she cosplays, and she's always kept it a secret from her real life, but then she is moving to a new town and then she's also getting a new job, so she decides, I'm done hiding that, which good for her because why not? So one day she sees on the official Twitter for the show that they're asking people to drop pictures of their cosplays of the characters. April tweets a picture of one of her cosplays. April is plus size. So the internet being the internet, Twitter being Twitter, they talk shit. There are people who are saying, oh wow, it looks amazing, but then there's of course a lot of people talking shit. And some even decide to tag Marcus because the internet is the internet. He sees this and he gets pissed off. So he is like, people are saying like, oh wow, can you believe she's cosplaying as this? Like, wow, doesn't she look fat? So like, fat phobic comments basically. So he gets pissed off and he says, no, she actually looks really good. And in fact, he ends up asking her out on Twitter. Fast forward to the date and she thinks that this is just like a publicity stunt. She's like just not looking forward to it because whenever she sees like the interviews that Marcus does, he seems not so bright. She realizes that there's more to Marcus than meets the eye. She ends up confessing to him that she writes fanfic for the show. And he thinks it's funny because he's like, oh, so do I, but he has to keep it a secret. So then he asks her what her user is. And when she tells him, he realizes that she is the fanfic author that he's been like talking to and like getting along with and like, you know, going back and forth with. Because again, that he has to keep this a secret, he has to keep it a secret from her. So we all know shit's gonna go down with that. But anyway, I already read this. I really enjoyed this book a lot. It was very good. Whew. Okay, guys, so we're finally done. I feel like I talked a lot in this video, even though I definitely hauled less books than what I normally done. This year, I do want to say that I'm going to do my best to not buy as many books, which I've so far succeeded because, again, these are books that I bought at the end of 2020. So that's it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoy. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!